The Jaipur bookmark reflects the core values of the publishing industry, and it brings together some of the greatest publishing professionals from around the world.
जयपुर बुकमार्क एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पे कि बिजनेस को समझने का एक अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है. सो आई थिंक JBM इज़ समथिंग विच इज़ फैंटास्टिक एंड पीपल हु डोंट नो अबाउट इट, उनको आना चाहिए, उनको इसका हिस्सा बनना चाहिए.
Jaipur BookMark. Come and celebrate literature, meet authors, agents, publishers. Join us at the Jaipur BookMark.
On behalf of Jaipur Bookmark Festival advisors, Aditi Maheshwari Goyal, Namita Gokhale, Naveen Kishore, Neeta Gupta, and Urvashi Butalia, festival producer Sanjoy K. Roy, and all my colleagues at Team Arts, we welcome you to the 8th edition of Jaipur Bookmark. The Indian publishing industry has grown rapidly with the world's attention converging on it. Creating a meaningful B2B platform for publishers was thus essential, and the Jaipur Bookmark was conceived to run parallel to the Jaipur Literature Festival. In the 7 years since its inception, JBM has fast emerged as a nerve center for the South Asian publishing industry and is indeed a focal point where books mean business. In 2020, the world grappled with the pandemic and businesses learned to reinvent themselves and adapt to an entirely new digital medium. Jaipur Bookmark 2021 is being held as a virtual event and as always continues to bring together all stakeholders of the business of books over meaningful discussions and far-reaching resolutions. A warm welcome to all of you to this wonderful session at the virtual Jaipur Bookmark 2021. European Union Prize for Literature, writing from across Europe. Anne Bergman, Matthias Navrat, Melis Friedenthal, and Rodan Al-Ghalidi in conversation with Neeta Gupta. The session is being organized by Cultural Relations Platform CRP, an EU-funded project in collaboration with the Jaipur Bookmark. The European Union Prize for Literature, EUPL, puts the spotlight on the wealth of Europe's contemporary literature. It ensures a wider international audience as well as access to readers beyond national and linguistic borders. 3 authors from across Europe, along with the director of the Federation of European Publishers, will be in conversation with publisher Neeta Gupta on the richness and diversity of literature from the continent. Anne Bergman-Tehon has been director of the Federation of European Publishers since 2004. Before that, she has occupied positions in the association. She has also worked as a journalist and in public relations. Matthias Navrat was born in 1979 in Poland and moved to Germany in 1989. His novels were awarded many times, most recently with the European Union Prize for Literature 2020 for The Sad Guest. His fifth novel, Traveling to Maine, will come out in August 2021. Melis Friedenthal is active in both academia and literature. He has published novels, short stories, and plays. In 2013, he won the European Union Prize for Literature. Rodan Al Ghalidi. Netherlands based Rodan Al Ghalidi, a writer of Iraqi descent, studied to be an engineer in Iraq before fleeing to the Netherlands to escape military service in 1998. His request for asylum was first rejected, and since he was not allowed to train in an official Dutch language course, he taught himself the language and started writing. He is now considered a Dutch writer. In 2007, he was among those asylum seekers who were granted general pardon by the Dutch parliament. Neeta Gupta is the publisher at Yatra Books and a literary consultant with a special emphasis on translations. She is also the chief editor of Bharatiya Anuvad Parishad's quarterly journal on translations, Anuvad. She has been working towards creating publishing connectivities across different languages and cultures. She has edited a volume of essays on translating from and into Indian languages titled Translating Bharat, Reading India. Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you European Union Prize for Literature, Writing from Across Europe, Anne Bergman, Matthias Navrat, Melis Friedenthal, and Rodan Al Ghalidi in conversation with Neeta Gupta. Neeta, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Anubhav. So I'm delighted here. I'm delighted to be in conversation with three wonderful writers from across Europe and the director of the Federation of the European Publishers. So as Anubhav says, we are going to be putting the spotlight on the wealth of contemporary European literature in this session. Our aim at Jaipur Bookmark has always been to pique the business interest of publishers, translators, readers, not just in the subcontinent, but across geographies. So to set the mood for the day, I'd like to begin with you, Anne. Since you represent the Federation of European Publishers, can you tell us a little bit more about the EU Prize and its objectives, and also a little bit about the consortium of which the European publishers are also a part of? So can we just put the kind of a little the story behind the prize? So over to you, Anne Bergman from the Federation of European Publishers.
With pleasure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And although I wish I'd be with you in India, well, I'm doing it from Brussels. So the prize was created together with the European Commission, who is the main funder of the prize, in 2009. And the objective of the prize is to look across Europe and broader than the European Union boundaries for emerging authors who could then be translated in the various languages, because one of the strengths of Europe is the diversity of languages across the continent, and to have them translated as much as possible. I've just noted that our three authors here, well, Nelis has been translated 14 times, Rodan 11, and Matthias, who had just received the prize. So he's not lagging behind. He's just received it less than a year ago. He has 5 translations already. So in 2009, when we launched the prize, really our objective was to support translation and support visibility of authors from across the continent. You ask about the consortium. The consortium is composed of 3 partners. My organization that represents book publishers at European level is one of the partners, together with the European Writers' Council and the European and International Booksellers Federation. And together we form the book chain in its large acceptation. And the idea is that then we can organize local juries, because we have local, we have colleagues in most of the countries that are concerned by the prize. Have to know that the countries are changing a little bit over time, but as we speak, there are 41 countries that are covered. And it's a very broad definition of Europe, as this year we are organizing a jury in Tunisia. So that's a broad acceptation of Europe. Since 2009, we have awarded the prize to 135 winners. We are now, and we have all promoted them. And I would say, I don't have the exact figures, but all of them have a number of translation, which I believe may have happened anyway, but certainly they have benefited from the exposure of the prize.
That's wonderful. In fact, I wanted to ask you also, as part of the introduction, was that has the pandemic this last year, has that made a difference, or how did the pandemic affect? Because you did have a prize announcement in 2020 as well. So if we could just put that in perspective before I go on and speak to the other writers as well.
Well, I think Matthias can talk about the consequences of the pandemic. Normally, the authors, when they receive the prize, we organize a nice ceremony in Brussels, and they all get to meet each other and to get advice from a number of professionals. But also we organize their presence in a number of events. First, and in local bookshop. When I say local, I mean national bookshops, so that they increase their visibility also at their own market. But then we have agreements with a number of book fairs across Europe, where there are some stages with either the national winners or the winners that have been translated, or the annual winners, etc. This obviously, as we have this virtual event, this has been virtual too, and I think it's a miss, despite of the fact that you can reach a number of people online. I think meeting your readers, but that I would leave it to the authors to comment.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anne. So let's go to Miles Friedenthal, who's here with us. He's from Estonia, and he writes speculative fiction. Miles has also been a lecturer, as we know, of theology and history. And I think all this meets in the kind of books he writes. So Miles, I was listening to an interview of yours sometime back, in which you say that this prize is a forward-looking prize, that it not only recognizes your work or the published work so far, but influences on how you write in the future. Would you like to comment on that? Over to Miles Friedenthal.
Yes, I can do that. And what I meant is that this prize is forward-looking in the sense that it fosters translation. And translation is something that is always so that it hasn't happened yet. It will happen sometime in the future, hopefully. And really, as I already mentioned, my book has been translated now into 14 languages in Europe. And it has been a terrific experience, actually, because all the time when the new translations take place, you get the chance to travel there, to meet people there in the book launch. Of course, this pandemic will or has changed things a bit, but my experience before the pandemic has been really, really great. And also, it's very interesting in this regard that it expands my own horizon a lot, so that traveling other literature spaces, so to say, because every language space is sort of its own field in literature, gives a good insight into how people think there, how they write there, and it also gives some perspective to your own work. So it is something that I've really enjoyed. It has been a terrific experience.
Thank you, Milis. To move on to Rodan Al-Khalidi, who's a Dutch author of Iraqi descent. Rodan, you in fact won the prize in 2011 for the novel The Artist and the Carrier Pigeon. And I think that was the year where your application for asylum in Netherlands was turned down. So could you tell us a little bit about this conflicting, this, could you share your experience from this time when you won the prize?
It was a very funny story, actually. I went to Brussels to get the prize, and then I am a refugee here, and my situation was very difficult because I must make some courses and exams to be allowed to live outside the refugees camp in Holland. And I couldn't get it because the question was very difficult for me. They are very stupid questions. Even the Dutch people cannot answer it sometimes. And when I come with this prize, the media was very interesting. How it's happened? You get this wonderful prize, and you fell down in the exam for the refugees. And it was a really very funny experience. Until now, I tell it in my reading as a joke. But it makes my situation very strong.
Yes, of course.
Because the people began to ask themselves, how could happen that this man get this prize? And all the publishers, they began to send me mails and how he didn't get the exam to live outside the refugees camp. They call it inburgering. And it was really shocked for the people from the system because it was the proof that they get the system is wrong, they thought in that time, not me.
Right. In fact, this is something we could talk about again, come back to. So which was the year when you finally got your asylum and you became a Dutch writer by right?
I began to be a Dutch writer when I just arrived, when I just learned a few words. If I go to Jaipur 2 days, I am 2 days Indian writers. I don't belong to any country. I'm not Iraqi, not Arabic, not Dutch, because that is why I feel I want to be writer. And if I cannot be writer, I will be hippie or gypsy. I don't like to belong to culture, to language, to religion. And that means I don't want to be free from these things, but I want these things free from me. And that is also, sorry, I went very far from your question.
No, but it's beautiful to know that.
Yeah, but I would like to tell about the European Union Prize of the Literature, because it means a lot for me. In that time, I had nothing, no passport. My Dutch was also even better than my English now. And we are writers, we are good in making books, but we are not good in making names. And maybe 300 years ago, the writers, he don't need name to travel to the readers, because he don't think about the readers. He think about his soul, his mind. But in this time, we need this passport kind of name to go to the readers. When I get the European Prize of the Literature, I told you in 1 hour, this prize gave me more than what I gave myself in all these years. because it let me traveling without me to all the readers. The 11 language, maybe now is more. I began to give readings in Holland even in the another city in Holland, they began to invite me because I'm the winner of the European prize. And I think when you get Nobel Prize, you get the money, you get the room, you don't need to write anymore. But the European Union Prize is wonderful because you will get the name and you will think, I will write the books to make the name stronger. And thank you.
That's lovely. Lovely. So let's come to Matthias Naurat, who's a Berlin-based writer of Polish origin. And in fact, Matthias, you're the most recent winner in 2020. And I'm sure your experience of the prize would be very different than, for instance, Miles or Rodin. So would you like to share with us? And in fact, Anne was also mentioning that maybe you could tell us about how different the experience was to win the prize in the year of the pandemic. Over to you, Matthias.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, by the way, for hosting us. I'm very blessed to be able to talk to you. So, well, in my newest experience of this prize, I have to say that I cannot say what it will bring in the future. Also, I'm already feeling this strong, change in, for example, translations and so on. And of course, I cannot relate to what it means in terms of traveling, because this was really impossible so far. But I still have to say, and I'm really grateful to the whole consortium and to the people behind the prize, because I really could tell that they are working very hard behind the scenes. They managed to get a lot of online meetings for us, and I had conversations with radio in New York or with you in India. So I had kind of the feeling of the global impact of the prize, and I'm still waiting for the physical travels. And one slightly negative effect was that I really would have liked to meet the other writers in person, because it's still something else if you meet somewhere and have a beer and talk into the deep nights about stuff. And this was impossible because, as Melis pointed out, this is something very important: the traveling and the getting to know the people from other parts of Europe and the world, and to be able to talk to them, even in my funny English, but still, it's very, very important for a writer to open your own horizon. And so I hope for this, and hopefully this pandemic will, become more and more normal, and things. I mean, not the pandemic, but things and the world will become more and more normal, and I will be able to do so. And but only even with this pandemic and the constraints it put on us, I really have to say that a lot of things happened already. So, well, it's just great.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'll come back to you about some more questions. But before that, I'd like to go back to Anne. And this year, book publishing has been severely hit, I'm sure, in Europe as well. So could you tell us, how this might impact going forward? I mean, I know, for instance, in Europe, bookshops were also closed, but governments came, and there were a lot of, I'm sure the Federation as well must have come to the aid of the publishers in Europe. So if you could tell us a little bit about how this might impact going forward, and what kind of, do you have any, maybe not facts, but, you could have stories that you could share with us about this unprecedented year for all of us in publishing. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Well, it has hit the sector, but very differently depending on the country. I think that, first of all, there are some countries where bookshops were never closed. I'm thinking Finland, by example, where bookshop remained open during the entire pandemic, and there are other countries where, well, they were completely closed. Some other countries helped immediately the sectors with some individual support for publishing and for the rest of the chain. On the whole, it's a very patchy situation where you have Germany, which is a little bit down, and France, which is even, and to take again Finland, which is quite a growth. The Netherlands is also even. So, of course, all that has to be assessed with the figures of Christmas, because, by example, in the Netherlands, there was the bookshop closed, I think, a fortnight before Christmas, which is in Europe a very important period to sell books. So it's complicated. There are several countries where the governments have also put into more long-lasting policies to support the book sectors. I think our champion is Italy, where they have really put together a lot of measures. They've given to some segment of the population vouchers to buy books so that people go back into the bookshop. They have deemed book essential, and therefore bookshop essential retail shops, so that even when everything else was closed but the bookshop remained open all over Italy. They've also created something which I personally find simple but very smart, is that they have injected money into library acquisition. Libraries are invited to buy new books from their local bookshop, not from a giant distributor who would give them good price. No, from their local bookshop, they have to buy books. So people going into libraries have new books, and the most recent one. At the same time, this injects some cash within the entire system. So unfortunately, there are some other countries where the government has not supported the book sectors as well as they have done in Italy or in other countries. And those will suffer more in the future. I'm thinking Portugal lost 25% of their turnover in 2020. And one thing is that it affects more the authors who have who are less visible on the public media, and and also the smaller publishers who have less visibility. So that affects cultural diversity quite a lot. If I can just say a word about the EUPL, and that I think what makes the prize very different from any others, apart from the fostering of translation, is that it's a prize which is organized nationally, but then promoted internationally, because there would be no way that even if I take the 3 authors here, that there would be people who would be able to read in all the languages. I mean, Estonian, Dutch, and German, plus the usually 11 other languages in it. So there's national juries. They have to follow very established criteria, and then they give us a cycle or a number of authors. And Matthias will do our utmost to organize something so you can meet your colleagues
You come to
at some
Hezbollah
point.
to meet me.
Right. Right.
I,
So
can
coming to
I
the
told
part
something
about
about the
translation.
books?
Yes, of course. Of course, I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back to you. So we can start with you, Rodan. I was just going to talk about the, from the perspective of translations. Obviously the prize influences in a major way translations and the promotion of your work. But did you work very closely with your translators? Were you able to, what are the languages? So this is something that I'm going to open out to all the writers, and I'm going to, lead it on to Milas and Matthias of course, is only recently experiencing that. But Rodan, you could tell us a little bit about your experience with the translations and whether you were able to work closely with the translators.
Translating is it's very difficult to give the book another clothes, another soul, another body. You know, in India, Tagora, we have it in Arabic in maybe 20 translating, but one translating is Tagore of India, I think. And why? Because the translator, he was very free to make his own Tagora. And we Goethe, for example, from Germany, or Dante from Italy, in Arabic, a lot of translating, but one is great. And always I am careful to read what say the translator. He said, I didn't follow the words, I will follow the soul of the author. And I say always to the translator, this is not Quran, this is not Bible. Do what you want, write the book as your book is it. And you throw everything you think, oh, I cannot translating. That means it's not good. And this is my meaning, just for my books maybe. And they was very happy, the translator. And why I do that? Because I believe it, but also because I am very lazy to give the book another time to another language. No, Sam, you have a child, he's 18 years, they say, go away, do what you want.
Interesting.
Okay.
Meelis, can I bring this question to you? Yeah. Meelis, can I bring this question to you about translation? You said you've had 14 translations ever since you won the prize. So can you just talk, 14 languages your books have been translated into. Can you tell us, because Rodan shared a very interesting idea of just giving the book over to the translator and letting them interpret. Did you, on the other hand, did you work closely with any of your translators? And what was your experience with the translations in different languages in Europe?
Yeah, thanks. I think that this depends very much on the translator, of course, because translators do their job individually and they have their own approaches. And of course, it depends a bit also upon the text that you're translating. For example, my text is a piece of historical fiction, and this means that I have names, places, quotations there that need to be sort of checked, and translators often wrote me what kind of sources I used, whether this was a direct quotation or did I change the quotation. So actually with most of my translators I work together quite closely, and I even at the end compiled a quite substantial list of questions and answers, so that whenever a new translator approached me, then I could already send that these are the questions that usually translators ask me, and I think that translating is very interesting in this regard also, because translators are close readers. So when you want to familiarize yourself with a text, then translating is the best way to do it, because you really get to know the text. So in a way, the translators are the best readers of your work. So I really appreciate their work, and it has been really interesting experience for me, because they find nuances in the text or questions in the text that I overlooked myself. So in a way, through translations, the text becomes even more interesting for me. So I think it's translations are an immensely good thing that can happen with a text. It's even so that you can say that a translation means that at least one person has found something meaningful in the text. So when a text is translated, then you can hope that it is maybe worth something at least. So yeah, I think translating is an important, and not only when it happens to your work. I mean that any kind of translation is important. So, for example, here in Estonian culture, translation is something that has laid foundation also to Estonian literary culture.
Right.
So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think, yes, you're right. And it's sort of, it vindicates the original writing as well, in the sense that, you know, I think that was a beautiful point you made there. Matthias, would you like to comment on, on translation? You also, some of your books have come out in translation, and you're still, I think the English translation has not yet been published, right? So if you could tell us a little bit about how you work, whether you like to work closely, or as Rodan says, you prefer to give over the charge to the translator. Would you like to comment on this aspect of your work?
Of course, I cannot talk a lot about translations of the Sad Guest, this recent book, because they are not out yet, and nobody ever wrote me so far. None of the translators. I think they are still, starting the work. But I can tell you a little anecdote about the translation of my book, of my previous book, The Many Deaths of Our Grandfather Jurek, which is the book about Polish history and about my family history. And I wrote it in German, of course, because I write in German. And then it then a Polish publisher was interested. So I knew that they would translate it into my mother tongue, right? So this is one of the few languages I could understand, because in most cases, the book is translated into a language you don't understand. So you can never tell, is it a good translation or not? But in this case, I knew I would be able to. So I was really curious, and I was really a little bit frightened also. And the woman who translated it never sent me a word about it. She never wrote me an email, had no questions. I had previous experiences, for example, with a Croatian translator, and she wrote me like 20 pages of questions, as Milis pointed out earlier. But this one, she never wrote me. And then one day I just got the translation, and I was really, it's really strange to read a book you wrote in German and then to read it in your mother tongue. And I started reading, and I thought, wow, this is even better than in German. It's strange. And even my father, he read it too, and he wrote me, it's better than in German. And then I realized that I probably wrote it while writing it in German, because it's about, Polish topics and about Polish way of thinking, about humor a lot. I kind of thought in Polish while translating myself into German, and then she retranslated into Polish, into the Polish thinking. And so this was really funny. And she never wrote me any questions. And I guess it's like Rodan says, that you have to catch the spirit of a book, and it has not necessarily have to be word by word, but it has to catch something, maybe the soul or the spirit or something like that. And she managed to do it. And I was really, okay, strange. It was like, parallel universe opened up, and I saw myself in Polish. And so, yeah, it was great. And this is really a very important work. Translators write, they write a new book, actually. It's not, it says Matthias Navrat, but it's something they write themselves out of almost nothing again. So I really admire this work.
That's a lovely story. That's a lovely story, Matthias, that you actually subconsciously wrote that book, thought that book in Polish and wrote it in German. So that was a lovely point you made there. Now, coming back to, we have about 15, 20 minutes here with us. What I wanted to just, get a sense that, before we take the questions from the audiences, how, this is a question for all of you, and you can choose to answer it, that does the literary community give you hope? And, especially in this year, a lot of us have gone back and we've thought about who, and what holds us together. So should we start with you, Anne, since, we're going in a kind of a pattern as you like. But does this literary community that we all belong to, does this give you hope in the face of this, the pandemic and this? Absolutely, we really don't know what's happening in this year, or whether things will improve. So in that, this sort of a situation where we feel there's a kind of hopelessness, yet is this community, do you feel good about being here? And can we, is there something that you're looking, that it gives you something to look forward to in the coming, in 2021? And over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, but I mean, I'm within the optimistic community, so I think that this pandemic will be behind us one day, but that we are facing a lot of more serious problems and on a longer term, and I think literature opens us windows on other people's life and make us understand the importance of not just being local or national, but broaden our views. I remember Matthias saying in the Bookfest video we did for Frankfurt Book Fair that this created empathy, and we are in a world where empathy is required more and more in order to address all of the challenges, whether climate change or the democratic problems that our societies are facing even in Europe. I mean, we thought we would be more or less safe from that, but we are faced by a number of democratic challenges in Europe. And the good thing about the pandemic is that people have read a bit more. So we can only hope that they have read more of various European and beyond Europe, of course, international authors to better understand the world and to start bringing a little solution at their own level.
Right. Meelis, would you like to talk about, being a part of this literary community, and what is it that you're looking forward to in 2021?
Yes, I think it's an excellent point that was right now made, that literature is something that gives us hope. And I'm myself a theologian and intellectual historian by training, and looking back at history, you can also tell that always after this kind of crisis events, literature and actually to say humanities more general have become more important. Because these events are something that people need to make sense of. And to make sense of the world, literature is one of the best tools that we have. So it has been always so that when something catastrophic happens, when these kind of really terrible things take place, then literature helps to make sense of it and to recover from it. And so in this sense, I'm also in this optimistic camp, and I think that literature and this literary community is something that will help us get over it, through these situations, and to open up a new world in a way. So this is what literature does. It's dreaming up new worlds that we can live in, and I really hope that we will see that world.
Wonderful. So, I think we've got some questions coming in. So I'm going to pick the questions for you right now. So there is a question there is a question which is directed at all of you. Do you think non-English European literature is viewed in the same way I think this is a question from an Indian reader, that is it viewed in the same way as, say, Indian literature written in the languages is viewed across the world? So do you think that, let me just see, the decolonizing movement and increasing the diversity initiatives brought to light. So what they want to know is that, do you think there is a kind of a similarity between sharing literatures which are non-English? So would you like to address that? Matthias, would you like to take that question where, you know, of how do you view literatures written in non-English languages? Are they sort of, do you think there's a movement, or there's a bigger battle they need to fight for discoverability?
Well, in my experience, I have to say that unfortunately, still European literature is highlighted more than probably in a global sense. It should be, like in percent. But for example, in Germany, there is a very, and we can see this also in the United States and in different European countries, that there is a strong movement which highlights those post-colonial topics, I would say, and also identities that are not European, or identities in Europe that are not originally European in the sense of, you know, history. And so I'm quite optimistic that what is, speaking of hope, right, I guess that what is changing right now in the whole world, and the pandemic is one example because it forces us to change, is a global conscience, in a sense of that it's not longer, you know, Europe ruling the world as it was 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago. And it's not the US, but it's the whole world. And there are literatures and there are cultures in the whole world that are dealing with the same problems, because it's like, you know, we have only one ball on which we live, and this little planet we have not much space, so we have to deal with the same problems: climate change, pandemic. We can see it really very well right now with the pandemic. It's not enough to, you know, vaccinate the Europeans and the Americans. Everybody has to be vaccinated, and I think, or I hope that people will understand it. And I guess that this small avant-garde, I would say, this open-minded, politically thinking people all over the world, they will bring something into the whole global conscious, and I think literature is a very important part of it. So I hope that we will, for example, in Europe, will see much more Indian translations in the future, or African translations, on and so on and so on. So I'm seeing a small change in this global conscience, but I think it's not still, you know, we're not there. We're not where we should be.
There is yet. Rodan, would you like to comment on that? On this?
Yes. What I like in English language, you are allowed to be very bad writer in English. You are allowed to speak very bad in English. The English language is very friendly, and it look like a McDonald's restaurant. Everywhere you come by to eat very fast and you go away. If we have this meeting now in Dutch, and we are speaking in 4 or 5 kind of Dutch, it will be impossible, because, oh, what you mean, or what you think, what you mean. But the English language made everything easy. And I think if you are writing book in English in India, you can send it to the publisher, World Edition, for example, in Amsterdam. It gives you a lot of possibility, and this is what I think we need this bad language to travel very easy to the another. I'm very thankful for the English language.
So, you know, there is a question for you, Rodan, yes. Ananta, who wants to know that how do you keep your soul intact and focus on your creative adventures while addressing the challenges of creating and, writing. We know the kind of life and your writings have brought out the kind of difficulties you faced as an asylum seeker. So they want to know, how do you keep your focus and your soul together? This is
I will tell you, I'm born in war in Iraq. I grew up in another war. I finished my study as a civil engineer in another war. Once I asked my mother, how old are you? She said 8 wars. I said, with years? She said, we don't have years in Iraq. But I learned one thing. I learned one thing from the war, not from the peace or from the literature. The war learned me to be very happy that I breathe. This breathing, this is the life. That you wake up, that you take a shower. It is very rich for me. And this is from the war. I never forget that lesson. I don't need meditation or yoga to forget this stupid happened in my childhood. I saw everything. I spent 9.5 years in the refugees camp in Holland. In the middle of the freedom, I was as animal 9.5 years. But I was very happy. Always I'm breathing. This breathing. And I have a place. These very little things make me the most rich from the people I know. And this is, I learned, just happy to be breathing, to be alive. The most beautiful job or book or art or freedom, not to have the freedom of Europe, no, or freedom of the spirituality or India, of the economy of Germany, no. Just to breathe, just to understand that you are alive. Same the sheep, or the dog. He don't know who he is tomorrow or yesterday, just now. This is very simple, but it makes me really always feeling as I get marijuana or something, but I never smoke or drink alcohol. I'm just happy like that.
Wonderful. Miles, there's a question from Akanksha, who says that how do we change the perception of readers about being lost in translation? This is Akanksha is a translation student, and she wants to know, how do we change that perception in the readers about how that text is lost in translation? Would you like to address that? Because with your background in your academic background, would you be able to answer this question for a student who would like to understand how to change the perception?
I could try. So I have translated myself, so I'm also familiar from the other side of it. So, of course, I think that what Matthias said is exactly right. This one Estonian translator has also said it, that the translation can be better or worse than original. It cannot be the same. So it is always so that with translations, you may win something and you can lose something, but you can't achieve exactly the parity. So the question lost in translation, it does, of course, exist, but at the same time, you just can't say that the translation is a copy. It's a new creation, as both Rodan and Matthias have said it before. So I think that it's not something to be afraid of. Translation is something that a translator should do with joy and with the idea that the writing can be improved. It could be better. So, and I think it's achievable. So it's no, I don't think so that translation is always something that you lost or you lose something. So no.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, according to you, a translation, even a bad translation, is better than no translation. So, it's always a good thing to have a translation. So, I think we are now coming to, I'd like to go ahead. There are a lot of more questions from Nikhil and Jessica, and there are, a lot of young people, students who are asking questions. But I think we need to now come to the closing comments from all of you. Acknowledging the fact that this European literature, the EUPL prize, has changed your lives in a way, in positive ways, and as well as given you a kind of, outreach to readers in different languages, in different geographies. Just a closing comment that, what is it that you're looking forward to in this year, and what is it that you'd like to leave our viewers with? A last comment, starting with Anne. Would you like to say something? Because there are a lot of students here as well as publishers. Something that you'd like to say about maybe relationships that could be built with European publishers and Indian publishers, looking at translations of these wonderful writers in India. Something that could really, speak out and take that message forward. Over to you, Anne.
Well, I think it would be wonderful if Indian publishers would look at the wealth of European authors who are done right in English. I like the MacDonald language, but I think it's a bit more sophisticated than MacDonald. But okay, whatever. But I think it would be great if we could do exchanges and have more Indian authors being translated into a lot of European languages and vice versa. I think we are all enriched when we enter into one particular experience in a book and learn to live the life of others. For me, I haven't been traveling in a year, but I've been traveling through books, and this is, I miss the real travel, but that has been quite a good compensation. So let's work together more and increase translation. We'll understand each other
So here's
better.
that. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much, Rodan. Thank you, Milis and Matthias. I'm looking forward to reading more of your work. And I think we're going to take the time now to, to bring your messages, to bring your books to India. We're going to all work together towards that. Thank you to the Jaipur BookMark, to the Jaipur Literature Fest. Thank you to all our wonderful, the audiences who've been sending such interesting questions, and to the wonderful team at which, the behind this great festival. Thank you, everyone, and looking forward to other sessions to follow.
Bye.
Thank you, Anne Bergman, Matthias Navrat, Melis Friedenthal, and Rodan Al-Ghalidi for this insightful session, which threw up so many questions and answered many others. Thank you, Neeta Gupta, for being such a fabulous moderator. And a big thank you to all of you for being a wonderfully attentive audience. This session was organized by Cultural Relations Platform, CRP, an EU-funded project in collaboration with Jaipur BookMark. All our sessions will be available to view later on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Once again, we would like to thank all our festival advisors and partners for generously supporting us. We hope you all enjoyed this conversation and will stay tuned for the next session. Indian Publishing Goes Digital, On-Ground Challenges and Learnings. Arunava Sinha, Isha Chatterjee, Giriraj Kiradu, Kanan Sundaram, Priya Kapoor, and Ravi DC in conversation with Aditi Maheshwari Goyal. Thank you once again. And now we present an interesting reading from the JBM short series.